For the past 3 decades, my work has focused on the twin aspects of poverty alleviation and skill development of rural youth. The geographies covered by me are from Africa and Asia. Within these geographies, I have encountered several youth who were drawn most of the times out of compulsion in the clutches of extremist movement. Countries like Nigeria, Kenya, Somalia, Democratic Republic of Congo, and several parts of India where the left wing extremist movement was strong have been affected with radical elements, attracting not only semi literate but highly educated youth into the extremist fold. The recent case of blast in Delhi by a few doctors is a case in point. That brings me to the subject of youth radicalization. Youth radicalization, that is the adoption of violent extremist ideologies by young people, is a critical and growing global security concern. This podcast explores the complex push factors like structural grievances, imaginary could be poverty, alienation, as well as the pull factors like identity, purpose, the recruitment networks, and so on that draw youth to groups like Al Shabab, Boko Haram, or India's left wing extremist. Finally, I will try to explain in my assessment and experience few multifaceted strategies necessary to de-radicalize these individuals so that they are successfully reintegrated into the national mainstream. Let me first try to analyze why the youth radicalization. I talked about the push factors of structural grievance. The why of radicalization lies primarily in structural vulnerabilities that push disillusioned youth towards extremist alternatives. Across diverse contexts, key drivers include complete socioeconomic marginalization, lack of relevant vocational skills, and therefore employment or education opportunities not being available, and real or perceived political alienation. In regions where groups like Boko Haram, that operates in West Africa, endemic poverty, weak near absence governance, and limited state presence creates a void. For young Nigerians facing chronic underemployment, the promise of a small salary, protection, and a sense of purpose from the extremist groups can overweigh the allegiance to a distant, non responsive government. The left wing extremist movements in India, in few states, similarly appeal to disaffected tribal and rural youth by capitalizing on historical grievances, perceived or imaginary, then land disputes, and the lack of infrastructural development, uh, presenting armed resistance as the only path to justice. In these scenarios, the motivation is less about pure ideology and more about addressing immediate material needs to seek dignity. In several instances, I noticed the youth being caught between corrupt policing, near absence of governance, and forcible kidnapping and indoctrination by militant groups. Now, let me dwell on how extremists recruit by talking about the pull factors of identity and purpose. The how involves sophisticated recruitment methods, which I call as the pull factors, which target the psychological and social needs of the youth. Extremist groups effectively sell an alternative identity. This is particularly evident in the case of Al Shabab in Somalia and Kenya, which recruits young diaspora members through online propaganda, offering an attractive, hyper masculine, if you will, identity as a defender of faith or a glorious warrior. On the ground, however, recruitment often relies on personal networks, sympathetic family members, friends, and community clerics, as many youths are recruited locally and face to face. Extremist organizations manipulate the adolescent need for belonging by creating powerful, exclusionary echo chambers, whether physical or digital, which normalize violent action and turn personal grievances into political mandates. Now, let me touch upon the strategies for reintegration, which I call as the path to national mainstream. Being radicalized youth, bringing radicalized youth back into the national mainstream requires shifting focus from purely punitive measures to comprehensive de-radicalization and disengagement program. These soft countermeasures are multifaceted, like psychological and ideological counter narratives. Programs must involve religious scholars or community leaders with influence in the rural ecosystem who can counter extremist narratives with moderate, historically grounded interpretation of faith or political theory. This cognitive change, according to me, is very crucial for de radicalization. Then there is this aspect of rehabilitation and providing economic opportunity. True reintegration is impossible without economic viability. Governments have seen in various surrender and rehabilitation policies targeting former left wing extremists in India must provide vocational training that are relevant to the industry, offer small business loans and educational opportunities through open schooling system. This addresses the initial push factors of poverty and marginalization. Then there is an important aspect of community and family support. Since personal ties are a primary recruitment vehicle, they must also be, in my view, a primary tool for disengagement. Strategies must focus on rebuilding family bonds and embedding them, the returnees, into a pro social community network, mitigating the social isolation that extremists exploit so successfully. And lastly, addressing the root cause. The most durable long term strategy is preventive. It requires improving governance, ensuring equitable access to justice, investing in education, vocational training, and infrastructure in marginalized areas, and eliminating the official corruption that pervades every layer of the government system or state overreach that often serves as the tipping point, if you will, for youth to join extremist groups. In conclusion, youth radicalization is a symptom of failed governance, systemic inequality, and the psychological vulnerability of the adolescent youth. By understanding the combined force of push factors like poverty and pull factors like promise of identity, countries can move beyond tactical security responses to embrace holistic strategies focused on human development and social inclusion, thereby securing the allegiance of their youth for the national mainstream. Thank you.